Thanks everyone again for joining. Today we have the privilege of having Gustavo Perednik with us. Gustavo has been a guest lecturer at more than 100 cities and 50 countries. He has published 20 books and more than 1,000 articles on Judaism, anti-Semitism, and Israel. He currently lectures on philosophy and on the history of Zionism in the Rimonim program of Herzl College, Israel. His latest book, Helenismo y Hebraísmo, is in Spanish, but probably will get translated soon. It's this one, so make sure to grab a copy for all of the Spanish speakers. And thanks so much, Gustavo, for
My
joining.
pleasure. Good to see you, Johnny.
So we're here in Judea and Samaria, beautiful hills of Judea and Samaria. This is where you reside currently. And let's start with your story. Tell me a little about yourself and how did you get to the place where you're at currently?
Well, I came with my family on Aliyah about 35, almost 40 years ago. And we enjoyed every day. We are very happy to live in Israel. Our family grew a lot. And from here I do my research, teaching and writing, lecturing, receiving interesting guests like today.
So you were born in Argentina.
Born in Argentina.
And you completed your studies in a PhD in education and philosophy?
Correct.
So how'd you get into that field? What prompted you to get into that field?
Well, I was always interested in, first of all, the education for me is the top of the top. I always think of how to translate in a simple language what I see as complicated, and in many cases I was quite successful in doing it, bringing to even very young students questions that seem a little bit complicated. And that is close also to another field in which I devoted a lot of years, which is Hasvara, Israel advocacy. The main thing there is just to simplify things and to give arguments very clearly and in a straightforward way. Part of education, I would say. And philosophy, of course, is deep questions, and I love teaching it, especially because it's very challenging for young people.
Yeah. So one of your books, I think one of the bestsellers, has been Judeophobia, right? And I want to understand, I want viewers to understand what's the difference between, you call it anti-Semitism, Judeophobia. What's the difference between the two, and why do you use that term exactly? What does the book say in general?
First of all, Judeophobia and anti-Semitism are synonyms, so they can be used interchangeably. But I prefer Judeophobia for several reasons. I mentioned them at the beginning of the book. One is that there are no Semites. And many times the word anti-Semitism is misleading because people would think that it's something against the Semites, and it's incorrect. Not because the word is wrong, but because there are no Semites. Semites is a concept that you can use to the very remote past, but not to present days. And to claim that a Jew from Morocco and an Arab from Syria and a Jew from Sweden, they all belong to a sub-race called the Semites, is simply absurd. But much worse than that. Semites don't exist today, but they did exist in the past. But anti-Semites never, ever, ever existed. Someone who is against the Semites or a publication or a political party. And therefore, the word was misconceived by Wilhelm Marr in 1879, a German Judeophobe, who chose the word Semite because he wanted to convey the message that he's not against Judaism. He's not anti-Jewish. He's against the Jews. The Jews are the problem of Germany. And that he wrote a pamphlet about it, which was very successful at the beginning. He created a league, the Antisemiten Liga, the League of the Antisemites, which didn't last long, but what was very successful was the word. The word he coined, everywhere it's used till today, to present or to describe the hatred of Jews. So why not to use a much clear-cut word, which is Judeophobia, coined almost the same year as Marr's anti-Semitism, but not by an anti-Semite or a Judeophobe, but a national Jewish thinker, Lev Pinsker, in his book Anti-Emancipation, he devotes one chapter to the hatred of Jews and calls it Judeophobia. And I prefer it much more for that and many other reasons. I'll add one more reason, which I think is important. The prefix anti with the suffix ism in every language means an idea that comes to refute another idea. Anti-Semitism or Judeophobia is not an idea, it's a group hatred. And therefore, if you give it a name that sounds ideological, you are giving it an upgrade. It's not an ideological thing, it's just plain hatred. You know that until the Second World War, people could say, I am an anti-Semite, and his friend would answer, well, I don't agree with you, but I respect your opinion. That doesn't happen today, because after the Holocaust, people are more careful to use the word anti-Semitism to define themselves. But the word is wrong, it's misleading. Some Arab leaders like Gaddafi or Assad at some point said, how can I be an anti-Semite if I am a Semite? Well, that's a pun, a play on words. It has nothing to do with Semite. Anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews. But when you call it with the wrong word, you can confuse people.
So what is this phenomenon of anti-Semitism that seems to happen throughout history? I heard somebody say that they hated Jews because they were the socialists, but they hated Jews also because we were the capitalists.
Usually the arguments of the Judeophobe are contradictory, but it doesn't matter because it's an irrational phenomenon. Joseph Edves, which was a noble man in Hungary in the 20s, 100 years ago, he coined a very wise apothegm, which is an anti-Semite is a person who hates the Jews more than necessary. Because who didn't hate the Jews in Europe of the 20s? So the anti-Semite for him was someone who's brutal. He would do something violent. We wouldn't. We don't like the Jews, but we wouldn't do anything against them. It's true. What happened to Judeophobia, that it's so present, omnipresent everywhere, and surprisingly so, I would say, not studied. I mean, you have very, very few courses on Judeophobia. You have many courses on the Holocaust. There are many Holocaust studies, but how can you understand the Holocaust if you don't learn clearly what Judeophobia means? The main answer to why is it so successful, which is, by the way, the most successful of group hatreds, the most lethal, the most universal, the oldest one, that's the name of Robert Bistrich, a top authority on Judeophobia. He passed away several years ago, and his book is called The Longest Hatred. It is a hatred that is there in every generation. And the key to its success is that it's very easy. I mean, if I am a demagogue and I want to blame some group for the evils in my society, if I pick up a group like, I don't know, the red-haired or the tennis players or people who like lettuce, I have to do such a huge propaganda, and I have to write so much and talk so much about it, that it's not worthwhile my effort. If I want to blame the Jews, on the other hand, I just have to say it. I don't have to bring any reason. Everyone will understand it's whether because they killed Christ, or they dominate the world, or they control the banks, or they are a vicious race, or they are all racist, or whatever, or they fabricated the Holocaust, or they expelled the Palestinian people. All these myths are already there. So the only thing you have to do is to just pick up one, blame the Jews, and everyone will understand why. That is why it's so successful. This doesn't explain when it started. That's another long story. But it does explain why is it used till today, and why is it so present, ubiquitously present in the discourse of intolerance nowadays.
Couldn't you argue that the same about other populations, for example, black people? That it's been successful historically, so I mean, people can perpetuate this hatred. What would be the argument there that
makes Judeophobia unique?
Exactly.
The first person to build up a field of research on prejudice was Gordon Allport, about 70 years ago, and he wrote a book, Prejudice, in which he studies a huge research on the American society of those times, and he finds two groups which are mainly the main target of hatred, of group hatred, which are the blacks and the Jews. And he brings all sorts of prejudices towards them. That the blacks, I would say, are dirty, that the blacks get angry very quickly, that the Jews are all miserly, that the Jews, whatever. But even Allport didn't realize that amongst the many, many arguments he brings of intolerance, there are two about the Jews which are completely qualitatively different, completely radically of another kind. One, deicide. They killed God. This is not just a question of discrimination and not of despise. Blacks are despised. They are not hated. Hatred means I want to destroy all of them, not I don't want to be with them. The second argument is world control. The Jews control, either Hollywood or the banks or whatever, but basically they have a conspiracy to control the world. Every prejudice against Jews have a birth date. I mean, every one of them, you can trace it, when did it start, whatever, but it's too long. In the meantime, let us say that these two arguments about the Jews make the hatred of them demonological. That is the main difference. When you hate the Jews, it's not because they took your job. It's because they run the world and they can destroy you.
So that's very interesting. So I'm thinking about modern Judeophobia disguising itself as only anti-Israel. So we have a lot of people saying that, no, I'm not anti-Semitic, or I'm not a Judeophobe. I am simply anti-Israel. I disagree with the policies of the state of Israel, and the state of Israel is oppressing. But personally, against Jews, I don't have any problems with Jews. And I'm wondering if this is just anti-Semitism or Judeophobia disguised as anti-Israel sentiment, or is this part of this neo-Marxist hatred towards, the powerful?
It could be the second. It is always the first one. Why? How can I say, I don't have anything against the Jews, but I want to destroy one state in the world, the Jewish one. All the rest of the states, there are 193 states that are fine with me, but there is one, the small Jewish state, that I want to destroy. But I don't have anything against the Jews. The only state that defines itself as Jewish, that has a Jewish calendar, and then speaks a Jewish language and studies Jewish history, that I want to destroy. But I don't have anything against the Jews. That is rubbish. I mean, how can I say I would like to destroy France, but I don't have anything against the Frenchmen? By the way, the majority of Jews nowadays live in Israel. So the solution that you want to implement in order to solve a problem that doesn't exist, the oppression of another people, we can talk about it afterwards, is to destroy millions of Jews in practical terms. I mean, you leave the Jews out without any solution against Judeophobia by destroying the only real refuge they have against it. But you claim you don't have anything against the Jews. It is just ridiculous. Many people believe it, but that they believe their definition doesn't make it true. When someone says, how can I be a Judeophobe if my girlfriend is Jewish? How can I be a Judeophobe if I like Steven Spielberg's movies, or I don't know, I like Kreplach or whatever, or Jewish music? What does he have to do with it? Or even they can say, I am Jewish. How can I be a Judeophobe? I don't want the state of Israel. That makes me Judeophobic. Yes, sir, it does. It doesn't make you a Nazi. That's what you have. When you say, how can I be, what you mean is, how can I be a Nazi if I have a Jewish girlfriend? That, you're right. If you are a Nazi, you want to kill the very last Jew anywhere he is. Even the last Jewish baby on earth, you want to kill him. You cannot be that. But I'm not blaming you. I'm not accusing you of being a Nazi. I'm saying that you're a Judeophobe, which means that you mispresent the Jewish people, or either the Jewish state, in order to demonize it. So what you single out the Jewish state in order to criticize it for things which you wouldn't criticize on any other state on earth. That is plain Judeophobia. It doesn't make you a Nazi, and that you don't have to be a goy to make that. Many Jews would demonize the state of Israel. Even Israelis, I can quote Israelis that do that. That makes them immune to the definition of Judeophobes. No, they are Judeophobic. They are.
So you can be Jewish and at the same time a Judeophobe.
No, not any doubt. I mean, there were many. We call it usually, it's a misnomer, but it's not as dangerous as anti-Semitism. We call it usually self-hatred. Why do I say that it's a misnomer? Because usually they don't hate themselves. They love themselves a lot, but they hate the Jews. And I can quote many cases. One, Otto Weininger, for instance, would say, I am in the middle between human beings and animals because I am a Jew and I would like to beg the Germans to destroy all of us. Please destroy them. Well, that's an extreme, I understand. That's a crazy extreme, which, by the way, doesn't happen in any group on earth that would say, please destroy all of us. There were some blacks in South Africa that would identify with apartheid, but they wouldn't ask all the black people to be destroyed. This one did. I understand that is an extreme, but sometimes through extremes, you understand the situation. Self-hating Jews existed in every generation. Now, most of them are very anti-Israel, and some of them are anti-Jewish as well. They express it with clear Jewish motives, but most of them are anti-Israel. So nowadays, Judeophobia is mostly against the state of the Jews, not against the religion of the Jews, not against the community of the Jews, and not the Jew as an individual. I think the Jew as a state.
That was part of my question, was how much of it is philosophically against the Jews as a people, or is it part of a broader neo-Marxist idea of, we have to destroy the powerful are evil. I don't know if you saw it, like just a few days ago, that Rashida Tlaib, one congresswoman, she wanted to do a Nakba event, which is an anti-Israel event, essentially, in the halls of Congress, in the House of Representatives. And Kevin McCarthy, the speaker, interjected and said, no, we're not going to allow you doing that. And Bernie Sanders, the Jewish senator, came to save her and gave her a room, in the Senate.
Yeah, that is a self-hating Jew, and I can prove it not only because of this. Many things that he says are close to Judeophobia. He hates Israel deeply. He would say the opposite. He would say, no, I don't have anything against Israel. I even want Israel to be sure and to live by itself. But, and then he'll add many things. You know that in the year 1908, the president of the General Assembly of the United Nations was a Nicaraguan priest called Manuel de Escoto. And he said the following: Israel, I love Israel. That is why I cannot allow them to crucify the Palestinian people. So there you have all the Judeophobia, all the myths of Judeophobia together, but under the disguise of I love them. I love them so much that I cannot allow them to be deicides and criminals and crucifiers and oppressors. Well, God protect us from those loves.
Yeah, of course. So let's switch gears a little bit to talk about the history of the State of Israel and what has happened here in the past few years and throughout the past century, essentially. So for those that don't know, and for the viewers that don't know, can you give us a brief overview of what happened? When was the independence of Israel? And this land that we're sitting right now is Judea and Samaria, which was previously under Jordanian control prior to 1967.
Well, this particular one, the Gush Etzion area, was not, because Gush Etzion was under Israeli control, and we lost it in the War of Independence, and therefore it has a slightly different status. No one thinks here that Gush Etzion should be evacuated, and a very few think that any other part of Israel should be evacuated. I use the word evacuation as opposed to give back, because you have to give back to someone who possessed it before, and there was no such a thing as a Palestinian entity who possessed this land. You know that one simple question for that, and very few people wonder and would answer to this anti-Israeli that says, I don't have anything against the Jews, but the Israelis oppress the Palestinian people. The question is, since when? Since when the Israelis oppress the Palestinian people? If he says it's since 1948 that we oppressed the Palestinians, I have news for him. is that Palestinian terrorism killed us much long before that. So how can you say that we started oppressing them and they killed us? They destroyed the Jewish community in Hebron in 1929. Women, children, and men, all of them, unarmed. They killed them because of our occupation of territories in 1967. It's a prophetic movement. Retroactively they killed them. So just a question of logic. Tell me when this oppression started. Many of them, they would say even more naively so, it started in 1967 with the Six-Day War. There is not one single Arab that claims that the conflict here started in 1967. That is only the Israeli left claims that the conflict started in 1967. Or they would say it didn't start there, but it was upgraded at that point. But what makes you think that anything related to the 1967 war has to do with the present status of war? I mean, they don't attack us because of 1967. They attack us for our existence. The Nakba is not for the 1967 war. It's because of the 1948 creation of the State of Israel.
So what is a Nakba? It's a celebration?
It's the opposite, I would say. The Nakba means catastrophe or something similar in Arabic. And it's a word they use, by the way, not from the beginning. About 20 years ago they started with it. The word they use to proclaim every May the 15th, which is the general date for the independence of Israel, that Israel, the creation of Israel, was a catastrophe for them. Two things I have to say. First, we are the only country on earth that every year we have to stand that our birth would be a question of mourning in the United Nations even. Mourning because we were born as a country. And I don't have to tell you, Johnny, after what we were born as a country. In 1948, after the Holocaust. And this is considered a tragedy that the Jews finally found a corner on earth to which called homeland. This is a tragedy for the United Nations. But the second point is that what happened then? Was there a catastrophe of the Palestinians? And the answer is, of course. The catastrophe was to reject the State of Israel. Not the birth of a State of Israel. The birth of a State of Israel would have brought them progress and happiness as it did to the Arab population in Israel, which are the creme of the creme of the creme of the Arab world.
Because they enjoy full human rights, equal rights, and you have homosexuals, being thrown off roofs in other countries in the Middle East.
And
that doesn't happen
in
Israel.
Here, to find refuge. But that the world doesn't know. I mean, once I heard the head of the gay organization in Spain saying that they were to boycott Israel. I wrote an article on that. And I thought, this guy needs to be in a psychiatric home. I mean, he is against the only country in the whole Middle East that would accept him as a full right citizen. But it's the only country against which he is. This anti-Zionism is so clearly Judeophobic because it is obsessive. They don't realize that it's not. One student at one university says, why? Because I criticize Israel, you will call me Judeophobic? And my answer was, it's not because you criticize Israel, it's because you only criticize Israel. I mean, tell me other countries that you criticize. If you criticized 50 countries and Israel is in the list, believe me, I wouldn't say that you're Judeophobic. But it's your obsession, Israel. It's the only country that raise your adrenaline, that you're ready to go. If I'm allowed an anecdote about it, once I tell one of them who said at university, because I lecture at universities at these subjects and I don't change my discourse because I'm teaching non-Jewish students, and said, I am not against Israel. Even he went one step further. I am pro-Palestinian. And what's wrong to be for a people who are oppressed? I think that you're wrong, dear student. Because I want to tell you something. You know what Black September is? No. Well, Black September was when Jordan killed 15,000 Palestinians in 1970 because it started a war in order to control Jordan, which was going to be overtaken by Arafat, and they killed them all. There was no one complaint on earth about it. No one said. And we were talking about thousands of Palestinians. So he says, well, I didn't know that I hadn't been born yet. Well, I'll tell you something about you were born. When it was the first Gulf War, the Kuwait expelled thousands of Palestinians from one day to the other day as a punishment to Arafat because he sided with Saddam Hussein when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. He said, well, I didn't know about it either. Yeah, but I have a secret for you. You didn't know, but now you know. Will you go to burn a Jordanian flag? Will you go to against the embassy of Kuwait? I understand that both Jordan and Kuwait arise your admiration because of the human rights respect. But in any case, do you hate them? Do you have any place in your soul to hate Jordan and Kuwait? I think you don't. The only country that you really hate because its behavior against the Palestinians is Israel. And it's a country that did the most of all of them for the Palestinians, created the Palestinian universities and gave rights to women in the territories and so on. But that you don't take in consideration. Israel is only judged by that.
But I've also noticed that it's philosophically inconsistent because I see, for example, gay people and transgender people, like seemingly oppressed people, marching with Palestinians as well, blaming Israel. When if you really, like, gay people, if they go to one of these states, they would be thrown off a roof. So you have like a mixture of all these, seemingly oppressed people coming together and battling the powerful. That's why I bring about the concept of neo-Marxism, because that's the entire idea.
Well, you call it neo-Marxism because Marxism is kaput.
Exactly.
Okay, so the ideology is dead, so they have to fabricate new things, and they fabricated many other. They are just not against power. They want to destroy civilization, basically. And in order to destroy civilization, to start with Israel is not a bad idea, because our contribution to civilization is very apparent. So they have a point. But in any case, you said the powerful. That is basically the main component of Judeophobia. The Russians who did the pogroms in Russia in the 1880s, 1890s, killed very poor people, Jewish peasants that lived their daily lives. And they would kill them thinking that they are fighting the Rothschilds, that they're killing. Each time they killed or raped a Jew, they were killing or raping a Rothschild. So this feeling that when you are confronted with a Jew, we are confronted with power, is basically a Judeophobic feeling. You can find it throughout ages as well.
Yeah, it makes.
Now it's true. You are right that the left nowadays has absorbed most of the Judeophobic myths. There was a kind of move of the Judeophobia from the right to the left in the last decades. Before, Judeophobia was a characteristic of the most conservative parts of society. Now it's not anymore. Just the opposite, I would say. It's more of the left, more and more so.
And it's very interesting that it fluctuates between right, left, and...
It doesn't fluctuate anymore. Now it's the left.
No.
I mean, you still have the old guard, but it's irrelevant nowadays. I mean, you still have people who believe that Jews use children's blood in order to make matzot. You have everything on earth, but the mainstream of Judeophobia nowadays is anti-Zionism, and that is the left.
Yeah. So when you mentioned, I started thinking about this. You mentioned that the Palestinians were expelled out of Kuwait, right? And so the term Palestinian, where does this civilization or this population comes from? Because if you look back, I mean, it's just like a lot of people came. You call Palestinians the people that lived in the land of Israel, before 1948. So they absorbed the term Palestinians, because if you actually see if you go and analyze the populations, you go to different cities, they have different cultures, they speak different, they have different accents. You have people coming from Egypt, people coming from Jordan, you have people coming from all over the all over the Arab world. So when this Palestinian identity came about and started its creation,
I would like to divide the answer in two parts. The first is the word Palestine, and the second is the Palestinians. The word Palestine, most people think that it comes from Pilechet or Philistine, the Philistines, because the Romans, when they destroyed the Jewish state, the state of Judea, after Bar Kokhba revolt in the 135, they renamed the country with the word Palestine as an homage to the Philistines, which had fought the Jews many centuries before and had already disappeared. This could be a possibility, that it comes from there. So Palestina is a Romanized word of this Philistea, and it was just paying homage to enemies, old, ancient enemies of Jews. The other possibility by archaeologist Davidson is that, Jacobson, is that Palestine is a mistranslation from Greek, from Palaistes, that means in Greek fighter. And where does it come from? Israel. Israel is the word Kisarita im Elohim banasim batuchal. You fought God and people, and you overcame them. And therefore, fighter is a vague translation of Israel, and it became Palaistes in Greek, and then Palestine. This is another possibility, and people usually don't know it. Now, who are the Palestinians? Till 1948, the Palestinians were the Jews. The Palestinians were the Jews of Palestine. Why more the Jews than the Arabs? Because the Jews wanted the independence of Palestine. The Arabs wanted to be part of a bigger Syria. They were part of southern Syria.
Actually, just to fill you up on that, my great-grandfather, I looked at my passport, the passport of my great-grandfather, and it said Palestinian citizenship.
No,
it actually said it's Jewish.
I wrote a biography on, you don't have it there, a biography on Avshalom Feinberg. And all the time this is the head of a network of spies during the First World War in Israel. They were all very proud Palestinians, which meant Jews that want the independence of Palestine, because there was no serious movement of independence of Palestine among the Arabs. Now, when in 1948, the Palestinians adopted very proudly the name Israelis, the word Palestinian remained in this limbo, and the Arabs just appropriated it and started calling themselves Palestinians as if it were an old nation. I always tell my students, and allow me to say it again, first of all, you know that the Palestine Post was Jewish, the Bank of Palestine was Jewish, the the Philharmonic Orchestra of Palestine was Jewish. Everything was called Palestinian, and it was made out of Jews. The brigade of volunteers that fought against Franco in the civil war in Spain, and there was a brigade sent also from Eretz Israel, and it was called the Palestine Brigade, and their names were Kowalski, Abramovich, and Yitzhakson, and not Arab names. They were all Jewish, and they were Palestinian Jews. So I say to these students who claim they are pro-Palestinians, if you bring me one document, not 200, not 10, one document, from the 2nd century, 3rd, 4th century, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th century, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, or 19, that speak about the Palestinian people, the Palestinian nation, so I'll come back and I'll change my argument. There is no such a thing. The Palestinians, if they are a nation, nowadays of course they are, but they are a very new nation. If they were an old nation, so they remained in caverns during the 19th century because no one knew about them. No one knew about this Palestinian nation. I have an article which I recommend to your viewers called Un pueblo de replicados, a people of replicants. because it speaks about a people with a false memory, that they think they're here for centuries. They think they have to recover Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was never in their hands. And by the way, to combine it with Judeophobia, it's basically the same thing that happened to Christianity. They needed an old religion, an ancient religion, so they said, all Judaism is ours. We continue it. We inherit it. The problem is that in order to inherit something, you have to be sure that the inherited person is dead. Because if you inherit someone who's alive, as it was the case, his mere presence would question the legitimacy of the inheritance. The Palestinians did something similar. They stole our history, and everywhere they present themselves as a people who existed for centuries. No one knows where, no one knows who were their leaders, what was their coin, what was their capital city, nothing, absolutely nothing of the Palestinian history.
There was a partition plan, though, right? In 1947, I believe the UN gave a partition plan that divided the land between Arabs and Jews. So, of course, maybe not Palestinians, but there was this idea of having the Arab population of former...
No one says there were no Arabs in Palestine.
No, of course, but the idea of self-determination, not self-determination, but the idea of having an Arab population that lived in Palestine having their independent state.
And who rejected it?
Of course, the Arabs rejected it.
So that's the main thing. That's the main thing. No, but it's not a minor detail.
But why did they
push this? We were
push
ready to
this
accept it, and they rejected it.
Correct.
So who's to blame?
No, I understand that, but my question is, why did the United Nations create this idea of having an independence?
Because there was almost a civil war between two populations, the Jews and the Arabs, and the United Nations. And the United Nations is not science. They decided many stupid things during their history, and they decided a partition of Palestine. And the Jewish leaders accepted it. I mean, it was against our rights, completely against our rights, but in order to achieve peace, we accepted it, and they didn't.
It's funny because I saw the other day that there's this minister, Minister Smotrich, which is a finance minister, and he gave a speech.
A very good one.
Which was, for many people, was very controversial in Israel. And the speech said something that, it resembles what you just said, which for me, it doesn't make sense for it to be controversial or problematic. It's historically accurate. Where is the Palestinian currency? Where is the Palestinian people? Where's the Palestinian language? Where's the Palestinian culture? There's no Palestinian people.
No, there is no. That would be the difference. That would be the difference with what Smotrich said. Nowadays, it's undeniable that there is a Palestinian people. I don't know for how long, but this conflict created a nation and the consciousness of a nation.
I meant historically. Where is the Palestinian people historically?
There is no ancient Palestinian people. There is a new Palestinian people, and once they accept that their history is quite new, they will adapt it to their demands, and their demands will be more rational, because what they demand is based on fantasy, that they owned this land at some point. They never did.
But their claims actually for self-determination, is it an actual genuine claim for self-determination, or is it a claim to own the entire land of Israel? Because I recall that learning that Arafat, came up with this idea of Palestinian people as a way to destroy the entire idea of the state of Israel. There is a concept like that.
There is no doubt. There was no one single moment in the short story of the Palestinian people, and that includes today, in which the aim of the Palestinian movement was to create a Palestinian state. Never, ever. The aim, the purpose of the Palestinian national movement was always to destroy the Jews in Palestine. That was the beginning. The Mufti of Jerusalem, Amin Husseini, who was the real creator, founder of the Palestinian modern nationalism, he was an ally of Hitler. He visited the extermination camps. He asked Hitler to extend the so-called final solution to Palestine. But that is not the worst part of it. His three heirs, Ahmed Sukairi, Yasser Arafat, and Mahmoud Abbas, none of them ever denied this origin or said we are not the same or said he was wrong or whatever. They continue the same line in a more polite way, but they continue the same line. The aim of the Palestinian movement is to destroy the Jewish state. Otherwise, they would have an answer of why didn't the Palestinian movement create a Palestinian state when they did have the territories, when the territories, they didn't have them, but the territories were not under Jewish hands. A very important date to remember, Johnny. When was the PLO created?
1964?
Exactly. There were no occupied territories, so-called occupied territories. The territories were so-called occupied in 1967. So why did they have to create an organization to liberate Palestine? Which part of Palestine they wanted to liberate? It's so obvious. But Judeophobia is irrational, and it's very difficult to reason with an irrational standpoint.
So let's talk about that. So just to recap the historical timeline. 1947, there was a partition plan to divide the state of Israel, the land of Israel, into Arabs and Jews. The Arabs rejected it. The Jews accepted it
and declared independence.
And
the Arabs invaded the tiny Jewish state created, and they lost more land. The Jewish state lost Gush Etzion, but gained other territories.
Yeah, so all this land that people call the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria, this land, Jordan captured it.
Correct.
And Gaza
was
captured by Egypt. And then Israelis lived without any claim to these lands whatsoever.
Well, many people in Israel did claim the lands of our forefathers. I mean, the historical claim of Israel is about Jerusalem and Hebron.
Yeah.
But we were ready to give up, or at least many Israelis were ready to give up their historical rights in order to have peace.
And then in 1967, they launched an attack in what we call the Six-Day War, right?
Who launched the attack?
I believe
it was a preemptive
attack from Israel to Egypt.
The attack was always there. I mean, they closed.
There was a war between Israel and the
Six-Day War, glorious war that changed the Middle East forever.
And Israel captured both Gaza and the Judea and Samaria and the West Bank.
Mainly Jerusalem was unified and liberated, and the Golan Heights from Syria. Sure. Right. And Israel, since then, most of the time, claimed that it was ready to give up some of those territories, although it has an historical right on them, but it was ready to give them up in order to achieve peace. But this invitation remained uncalled till today, and unanswered. I'm sorry.
So what was the status of this land, the Gaza Strip, and Judea and Samaria and the Golan Heights after 1967? Did Jordan have a claim still for that?
No,
land?
The Jordans in 1988 gave up all claim to the land.
Jordan gave up all claim?
Yeah.
And was there a movement from the Arabs in 1967 for self-determination in this land?
No, there was a movement, that they say we want a Palestinian state, and they don't tell you exactly where. And when Arafat was confronted with the possibility of ending the war forever, he rejected it. I mean, Ehud Barak in the year 2000 was ready to give up absolutely everything, including Jerusalem, to Arafat. That wouldn't have been approved in Israel. I mean, the people would have been against it. But Ehud Barak offered it. And Arafat, when he saw that this receiving all the land meant the end of the conflict, he rejected it and launched, without giving any alternative, without giving any other option, he launched the bloodiest intifada that killed more than 1,000 Israelis in cafeterias and birthday parties.
With weapons that Israel gave them.
Some of them. True. That was a catastrophe of the Oslo agreements.
So why did Arafat didn't want to end the conflict? Why wouldn't he?
I told you, because the aim of Arafat is to destroy the Jewish state. So if you end the conflict, you cannot do it. See, his aim was another one. I mean, I don't agree with people that say, the Palestinians don't miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I don't remember who coined this phrase, but that's what they say about them. I don't agree, because if you say that, you mean that they had many opportunities to what? to build a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria, but that is not what they want. It's not that they miss the opportunity. They know that their opportunity will come someday to destroy the state of Israel, and that's the only thing they want. They don't want to create, they want to destroy.
And is that I wouldn't say that's, and I'm sure you agree with me, most people, or I'm not sure, most people in Judea and Samaria, the Arabs living there, they just want to live a normal life, raise children, raise family. We're talking about the leadership, right?
But it's a very, very monolithic society, so it's very difficult to know exactly what's their opinion. For that, you need many years of democracy, to build up the opinion of people. You won't have it in 5 years either. So it's true when we say the Palestinian is a generalization, we mean the Palestinian leaders. But it's the same as to say that Iran wants to destroy Israel. It's a minority of Iranians that want to destroy Israel, and I would say a tiny minority, but they are in power. So what can we say? It's not. I mean, the state is in their hands, the state of Iran.
Yeah. And you were opposed to the Oslo Accords?
Absolutely. The Oslo Accords were a very, very big mistake on the part of Israel. I mean, just trying.
What were the Oslo Accords?
What were they?
Yeah, what were they?
Giving Arafat arms, prestige, territory, bringing it from Tunisia, where he was on the verge of collapse. He couldn't pay the salaries of the PLO anymore, and just reviving it with the fancy dream that once they have all this, they'll become civilized. There is not one extremist movement on earth that once it achieves something, it becomes more moderate. It doesn't exist. Look at the communists, look at the Nazis. Once they attain something, they become more radical, not more moderate. And that's what happened here as well. But Netanyahu was one of the people who refuted the Oslo Agreement immediately, and he was mispresented as an enemy of peace when he was saying the truth. I'm not against the Oslo Agreements because they'll bring peace. I'm against the Oslo Agreements because they'll bring the bloodiest war we had so far, and with more weapons, and it'll catch us in a weaker position. And that is exactly what it happened.
I think, and I'm wondering your thoughts on this. I think one of perhaps finding a political solution to this is perhaps more complicated than building trust from the ground up between the peoples. And before the Oslo agreements, I recall stories, people telling me that they used to go into
Jericho.
I
went myself.
You used to go
Absolutely.
to Jericho, and you spoke to Arab people, you got along with them.
That to a certain degree happens still to this very day, but the situation was much more friendly between Arabs and Jews, and then peace broke out. Everything was destroyed. Yes, it's absolutely true. The left lives in dreams. They just live in dreams. There is nothing they say that has any connection to reality, and that's why they become so angry all the time, because they want to bring heaven to earth, and what doesn't happen, then they get very angry. They start hitting reality, not changing their ideology, but blaming reality that it's not happening as they wanted. And they mispresented this all the time.
What are your thoughts on the two-state solution, as they call it, or for example, the Ehud Barak peace plan, or which plan do you sympathize more with, and do you agree with the general idea of establishing in Judea and Samaria a Palestinian state, or a second Palestinian state, since we already kind of have a state in Gaza?
When you talk about a solution, you need a problem. I mean, it's very difficult to give a solution and not knowing what the problem is. So what is the problem that you want to solve with this solution? If the problem you want to solve with this solution is the state of war, I have very bad news for you, is that each time that we approached a little bit to build up a Palestinian state, there was a general attack. There was a general war against us. So it doesn't bring peace, it brings war. So if that is your problem, if your problem is war, there is no... I would be for any solution that brings peace to Israel. Any solution. Not the peace of cemeteries, of course. But to call the two-state a solution is already a misnomer. It's not a solution; it's a proposal. But it doesn't solve absolutely anything. It aggravates the situation. Am I against a Palestinian state? I wouldn't declare anything about that. Let's see. I think that in the current situation, a Palestinian state is a big problem and not a solution. It's creating a terror state in the heart of the land of Israel. But future will say, if during two generations the Palestinians live in peace and democracy and freedom, and they start being very friendly, they don't want to destroy us anymore, then between us, then they won't need a state. But we'll see. I think the Abraham Accords are the solution, because they really bring peace between countries. That's what's happening, and it was stopped when Netanyahu's government was toppled. But now we are starting again to reveal the possibility of Abraham agreements, and I think that would be the correct path.
So why did the Abraham Accords happen? What was the inception of the Abraham Accords? Because if I recall, in Saudi Arabia, they had the famous declaration of no peace.
No, that's Khartoum in Sudan.
In Sudan.
But it's a good example in any case, because we signed a peace treaty with Sudan as well.
Ah, yeah.
The Khartoum is the capital of Sudan.
So this was in Khartoum.
Yes.
And what happened in Khartoum? They declared the Arab countries came together and
after the 6-day war, and they brought their solution, which is the solution all the time that they bring. No peace, no dialogue, no agreement, no dialogue and no agreement. No recognition of Israel, nothing.
Until we solve the situation.
They didn't say anything.
They didn't say anything.
No, it was not conditional. It was no.
So what caused Saudi,
Bahrain,
or these countries to warm up ties and create ties
they
with
saw
Israel?
how Israel is a fait accompli, and it's a fantastic society, a miracle in our words. And therefore, for how long can you be so stupid, destroying the generations of your own people for a nightmare that won't happen, by the way, just to destroy another? How long can you continue like that? At some point it had to happen, but you needed a great leader in Israel to understand the situation. And when you had Ronald Reagan in the United States, and Netanyahu saw the possibility through Ronald Reagan, because without the American government supporting it, it wouldn't have happened either. But the combination was perfect.
There's another potentially contentious issue that people discuss about, which is the Palestinian refugees. So I know there's a very big distinction between the way that refugees are considered for the Palestinians and for non-Palestinians. Any others?
Yeah.
So what's the difference and what's the source of this?
A refugee is someone who is escaping from a war, and if you send him back to where he came from, could die. A refugee, you have to accept. But no other people on earth, the refugee is the descendant of someone who escaped because he wanted in a war, which is the case of Palestinians. I mean, you cannot say that the grandson of a Palestinian who resided in Israel in 1948 and now is a civil engineering in Manhattan, he is a refugee. For the United Nations, at their definition of the UNRWA about the Palestinians, that is a situation. It is absurd. It's also one more thing against Israel. They single out Israel in order to attack Israel, so they distort even the definition of what a refugee is. So there are no Palestinian refugees, or there are very few Palestinian refugees. There are Palestinians who were not accepted in the societies where they live because their governments wanted to use them as pawns in order to destroy Israel.
Interesting. And nobody talks also about the Jewish refugees. How many people left
More.
the Arab nations?
800,000, 700,000. And there was an interchange of populations which happened between Greece and Turkey. It happened between India and Pakistan. In every war, there is some type of interchange of population. When it comes to the Jews, There, it's not admitted.
They're singled out. The Jews are singled out as
Absolutely.
and this UNRWA organization, the UN,
It's a Judophobic organization with mostly teachers that teach that Israel has to be destroyed, and that perpetuates the situation of very of people who unhappy cannot find their place on earth, but not because of Israel. Israel would have solved it very quickly, and the Arab world, with so many resources and such vast territory, could have solved it in 2 days if they wanted to.
what do you think is the biggest challenge facing Israel right now, currently, 2023?
The biggest one is difficult to say. I would say the judicial reform, because if we don't correct the judiciary in Israel, we won't be able to progress much more. I mean, the judiciary in Israel gets involved in absolutely everything, in economy, in warfare, in international relations, anything you name it, and they have an opinion, a verdict, not an opinion. This has to be changed. It couldn't be changed in this first attempt for several reasons, but it will at some point, and that is, I think, is the biggest challenge.
You think Iran isn't even a greater?
Absolutely, you are right. What I said is a second one. Thank you. The first one is definitely the deadly threat from Iran. If we don't solve Iran first, we won't be to solve anything else, because we won't be here. But I am optimistic that it will be solved in the near future.
You think Israel will somehow attack Iran in the next 12?
Israel will defend itself against Iranian aggression. Yeah, it will defend itself. Well, it's been defending itself very effectively during the last years. I mean, many scientists of Iran that are not there anymore, and maybe cyber attacks and other things which we don't know. This very last episode against the jihad in Gaza has all to do with Iran. This is they are representing Iran in their attacks. So Israel is fighting Iran all the time, but the final blow was not yet concrete.
So I want to switch gears. I also want to ask you about you. One of your best-selling books is about a prosecutor in Argentina,
Alberto Nisman.
Alberto Nisman. So for those viewers that are not familiar with the situation in Argentina, what exactly happened there, and how did this book become such a bestseller?
I was the first one to write about my dear friend Alberto Nisman, who came here where we are now talking with me. I was the first one to bring him to Israel.
I'm sure I cannot feel his shoes, but
yeah, you can feel his presence. He was a very, very brave man, sometimes irresponsible about it, who disclosed the collusion between the Argentinian government of Cristina Kirchner and the Iranians in order to whitewash the Iranians for their participation in the terror attacks in Argentina, the Amiens bombing mainly, and for exchange of money, basically, Cristina was approaching them. Nisman caught it in time. The story is long. I cannot tell you the whole story. I would be very happy to tell it to an audience at some point. I do it. But he disclosed it, and he was murdered. I wrote the book when he disclosed it. So when he was murdered, the book became a bestseller. It was a tragic cause that made it so well known. But in any case, I was the first one to tell his story. After he was murdered, I wrote another book called Morir por la Argentina, To Die for Argentina. The first one was called Matar sin que se note, To Kill Without a Trace. To die for Argentina is basically how he was killed and why, who was operating behind it. But I think that I sum up what you asked me, what happened exactly. And now it's still being investigated, the case. With the present government in Argentina, not much progress can be done because Cristina is still the vice president. But that could change in the coming October when there are general elections. And I hope I'm always an optimist. I hope that there will be progress in Nisman's case as well.
So when he was killed, a new prosecutor came, right? In theory,
but you're talking about a new prosecutor on the AMIA case.
No, I mean
people mix it up, because one thing is the murder of Nisman, and another thing is the AMIA case, the bombing of AMIA. Yeah, many prosecutors are now. Nisman was replaced by a battery of prosecutors who are handling the AMIA. That there's not much progress there either.
And how come? I mean, if he had
all the material is there, why don't they use it? Okay, ask the Argentinian judiciary, and you'll find very depressing information about people who want to stop it for political reasons, who want to paralyze as much as they can the investigation of AMIA.
And AMIA was the
Jewish community of Buenos Aires, the main Jewish building in Argentina.
And it was bombed by the Iranians.
By a proxy of the Iranians, not the Iranians themselves. Hezbollah. The member was Berro, who was a suicide bomber trained by Hezbollah in Lebanon. That is all in my first book, and that is what Nisman discovered as well, because he discovered, first of all, that the Iranians perpetrated the AMIA bombing before he went to show the disclosure between Cristina and the Iranians. And it was perpetrated on July the 18th, 1994. 1992 was the Israeli embassy. And there were 85 people dead, hundreds of people wounded. It was the worst terror attack in Latin America till then. And unfortunately, it was not still solved.
It seems like Iran has its tentacles all over the world, including in Latin America. It has been
in Venezuela mainly. Chavez became the ambassador of the Ayatollahs, and through him, much of Iranian influence went into Latin America, including Argentina. In my book, I just present the picture in which Chavez is the one who brings Cristina closer to the Iranians.
Oh, interesting. And there was a president in Argentina called Menem, right? Last name Menem.
The 90s.
I heard that his son was killed, or I don't know if it's speculation, but his son was killed seemingly by the Iranians.
That's speculation. I mean, it cannot be proven. You know what? You're saying something very interesting. I wrote my book consulting Nisman, the first book, all the time, because it was about his work, and I included the death of Carlitos Menem, Menem's son, in a helicopter accident, as part of a conspiracy to punish Menem. And Nisman told me, this you rub out immediately. I don't want you to write anything that cannot be judicially proven. And this you cannot prove. And I dropped it. So it cannot be proven. There is a possibility. He was killed. He died in a helicopter accident, and all the witnesses were neutralized afterwards. So there is a high possibility that he was murdered. Who exactly, no one knows.
And why would he have been murdered? What was the reason?
As a warning to President Menem not to confront the Iranians.
With the AMIA issue as well?
Yeah, with the AMIA issue. Because at the beginning, Menem was very for confronting the Iranians, but slowly he became less enthusiastic about it.
I think he was the only Argentinian president that visited Israel, right?
He was the first. No, you're right. He was the first, and only other people who were president of Argentina visited Argentina, but not while they were presidents. And many, I was amongst the people who received him. He came to Casa Argentina, the Argentine house, and I translated for him there. And if I may so, I also may add a funny part of it that tells a lot about Menem's character. I brought him to a school in Israel called República Argentina, Argentine Republic School. And he comes to the school and says, "What's the name of the headmistress?" I tell him. Tell her that he has very beautiful eyes, literally. I tell her that she blushes, and he continues. She was flirting through me with the headmaster or mistress, and that was Menem. I mean,
He was married and everything.
Yeah, no problem.
So I want to ask you, what advice do you have for young people that go to college in the States, that they're, you know, passionate about and very proud of to be Jews and proud of their Jewish identity and passionate about the defense of Israel?
Whoa, I hope there were many like that. Yeah. Do you know many?
No, definitely not. Passionate about the defense of Israel, perhaps not, but there is this, I notice there's this fear of speaking out. There's this fear that people, that you're not well versed in the defense of Israel, or you're not well informed.
Well, as I told you before we started filming, I give courses on Hasbara, Israel advocacy. Now I have a group of Spanish speakers in Tel Aviv with whom I meet every week, and we practice how to do it. You want a short advice, and the short advice would be, it's an unpleasant short advice, but it's unavoidable. Remember always that counterattack is not an attack. Counterattack is a way of defending yourself, and it's the only effective way. So unless you're talking with someone who's very well meant and confused, in that case you don't have to counterattack. But usually you have to confront very aggressive arguments against the Jews or Israel, so you have to counterattack them. Now, what to say and how to say it, that's part of the course. But in any case, that would be my bottom line advice about it. But I'm very happy that there are so many proud Jews who want to defend Israel. I hope that you're right.
Well, maybe you can come to the States soon, and we can have you speak at some college campuses.
Be it whenever.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Gustavo has many great books that are worth a read. He has one in English for those English speakers. It's called To Kill Without a Trace, and the rest are in Spanish, but I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to translate.
Or in Hebrew. That one, I would say the Hellenismo y Hebraismo, which just came out, it's presenting the roots of Western civilization, but claiming there that one of the roots of Western civilization, not the Hellenic part, so you can guess which part of the roots of Western civilization was overlooked through centuries. How to make it clear, how to present. And I think that is also a tool against Judeophobia, because if you realize how much the Hebrew nation contributed to Western civilization, it's very difficult that you'll hate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Gustavo. Thank you for having me.